For 3,000 years, the world has been lying to you about the Odyssey's so-called hero. You think you know Odysseus, the clever hero who fought a war and sailed home. That story is a lie, or at least only 1/8 of the truth Homer left buried. Did you know Odysseus could have come home in year 1, but chose not to? Did you know Penelope likely knew it was him in disguise and tested him first? Yes, a goddess offered him eternal life and he stayed 7 years before saying no. And yes, his own wife outsmarted him in his own home before he ever realized. This isn't another retelling of the Odyssey. This is the trial of Odysseus. 3,000 years of poets, philosophers, and priests all reached different verdicts on the same man. By the end of this video, you'll question whether Odysseus deserves to be called a hero at all. 800 years before Christ, a blind poet named Homer sang the first version of this story. In his world, heroes were simple, strong, loud, doomed to die young, like Achilles. But Odysseus broke the mold completely. He won battles with his mind, not his sword. His most famous victory wasn't a fight at all. It was the greatest deception in history. Greeks didn't just admire this, they worshipped the man who taught them how to lie well. Their ideal man wasn't honest or noble. Their ideal man was the one who never got caught. Homer was performing for kings and lords. They needed a hero who justified their ruthlessness. The Odyssey, in other words, may have been the first political propaganda ever recorded. And to the Greeks who first heard it, Odysseus was perfect, clever, victorious, blessed by Athena. But here's where the story turns dark, because not everyone who came after agreed with Homer. So if Homer's hero was a lie, then what's the truth? Here are 17 facts that prove it. Number 17. The man we call Homer may have never been a single person at all. Modern scholars believe Homer was a tradition, generations of bards, each adding new pieces. Even the Cyclops story exists in folklore from Ireland to the Caucasus, older than Homer himself. Meaning the book you've read is 1,000 years of storytelling crystallized, not one man's vision. Number 16. The Trojan horse wasn't clever strategy, it was a religious war crime. Ancient Greeks held xenia, sacred guest host laws, as the highest moral code in the world. Odysseus didn't just outsmart Troy, he weaponized their faith in the gods against them. This is one reason the Romans, centuries later, would condemn him as a war criminal. Number 15. He murdered an innocent man named Palamedes by framing him for treason. Palamedes was the man who exposed his fake madness, placing baby Telemachus in front of his plow. During the war, Odysseus forged a letter from King Priam and planted gold in his rival's tent. Palamedes was stoned to death by his own army for a crime Odysseus invented from pure spite. Number 14. When Troy fell, he argued for the murder of an infant child. Astyanax was the son of Hector, and Odysseus feared the boy would grow up seeking revenge. Some ancient sources say Odysseus himself threw the child from the walls of Troy. This is why centuries later, the Romans rejected Homer's hero entirely and rewrote him as a villain. Number 13. Everyone remembers Calypso, but he also spent a year with the witch Circe. By some ancient accounts, Odysseus fathered 3 sons with Circe before he ever sailed home. While he lived in luxury with goddesses, Penelope was alone, fending off 108 suitors. The man who would later slaughter her suitors for disloyalty had been unfaithful for nearly a decade. Number 12. When he finally returned home, Odysseus didn't just reclaim Ithaca, he bathed it in blood. The first suitor he killed was Antinous, son of Eupeithes, the cruelest of the 108. Antinous had plotted to murder Odysseus's son and seize his wife and kingdom. Odysseus's first arrow flew through Antinous's throat as he raised a cup of wine to his lips. Then he killed all 107 others, locked in the hall, one by one, with no escape. But the most disturbing moment came after the battle was already won. 12 servant women were forced to clean the blood, then hanged together from a single rope. Homer wrote that they died like thrushes caught in a snare, Even he flinched at the cruelty. 3,000 years later, scholars still debate whether Homer himself thought this was justice or madness. Number 11. The dog scene that everyone calls beautiful is actually one of literature's cruelest moments. Argos waited 20 years for his master, sleeping at the gate, refusing to leave his post. When Odysseus finally returned in disguise, Argos was the only one who knew him instantly. But Odysseus could not break cover, so he walked past his dying dog and pretended not to care. Homer wrote that Odysseus wiped away a tear in secret, and Argos died at that exact moment. Number 10. Odysseus left Troy with 12 ships and over 600 men. 10 years later, he arrived home alone. Every single one of those men was dead. Storms, monsters, witches, sirens, but every death traces back to one of his own decisions. Number 9. But to be fair, his men weren't innocent victims. They sealed their own fates. They opened a sacred bag of winds out of pure greed and were blown back from sight of home. Then they ate the sacred cattle of the sun god, despite Odysseus warning them not to. Zeus struck their ship with lightning, and only Odysseus survived because he hadn't eaten. Number 8. Odysseus had escaped the Cyclops alive and anonymous. Then his ego ruined everything. He shouted his real name back at the blinded giant. Pure arrogance, pure ego, pure self-destruction. That giant was Poseidon's son, and Odysseus had just told the sea god exactly who to destroy. Every storm, every monster, every dead crewman after this, it all began with one shouted name. Number 7. The greatest Greek hero of the Trojan War never wanted to fight in it. When recruiters came, Odysseus pretended to be insane, plowing his fields with salt instead of seeds. Palamedes saw through the act by placing Odysseus's infant son in the path of the plow. The man we celebrate as the war's greatest mind was forced into it, screaming on the inside. Number 6. Odysseus's ancient Greek epithet was polytropos, meaning the man of many lies. He even lied to the goddess Athena's face, knowing she's a goddess and could see straight through him. Worst of all, when he finally returned, he lied to his own grieving father Laertes. He pretended to be a stranger, asked about his missing son, and watched the old man break down weeping. Scholars call this his needless cruelty problem. Odysseus lies because lying is who he is. Number 5. Most people think the Odyssey ends with reunion. It doesn't, not even close. Deep in the underworld, Odysseus had met the blind prophet Tiresias, who delivered a final prophecy. Tiresias told him, even after returning to Ithaca, he must leave again forever. He must walk inland carrying an oar until he reaches a land that has never heard of the sea. For Odysseus, home was never the ending, it was just one stop in an endless wandering. Number 4. When Odysseus came home, the famous bed test wasn't what you've been told. Penelope turned to a servant and said calmly, "Move our bed outside the bedroom for our guest." But that bed was carved from a living olive tree rooted deep into the floor. It cannot be moved. Odysseus exploded in fury. "Who moved my bed?" exposing himself instantly without realizing it. She wasn't testing whether he was Odysseus, she was testing whether he was still her Odysseus. Number 3. Odysseus didn't make it home through skill. A goddess engineered every step. Athena loved him because he fought with his mind, exactly like she does. He was her mortal mirror. She wasn't just helping him, she was playing chess against Poseidon. And Odysseus was her queen piece. Without Athena, Odysseus dies in Chapter 1. The legendary hero was always a goddess's project. Number 2. Many scholars now believe Penelope recognized her husband long before he revealed himself. She ran her own kingdom alone for 20 years. A husband in disguise wouldn't fool her. She played dumb to test his loyalty, making him prove he had returned as her partner, not her ruler. The whole time you thought he was outsmarting her, she was outsmarting him in his own home. Number 1. the biggest secret of the Odyssey. Odysseus could have come home in year 1. A goddess offered him eternal life, paradise, immortality, beauty, peace. He stayed 7 years. Yet every day Homer says he sat on the beach weeping for home, then returned to her bed at night. So the question isn't whether he wanted to go home. The question is, why did he stay so long? Maybe Odysseus wasn't a man trying to come home. Maybe he was a man afraid of arriving. So, if Odysseus was this flawed, this cruel, this broken, then who is the actual hero of the Odyssey? The Odyssey doesn't have one hero. It has 4. First, Penelope. She held an entire kingdom alone for 20 years against 108 men. Her weaving trick, promising to choose a suitor when the shroud was finished, fooled them for years. Odysseus survived monsters with a goddess protecting him. Penelope survived alone with nothing but her wits. Second, Telemachus. Odysseus' son, who started the epic as a frightened boy with no power. He sailed alone to find news of his father, leaving home for the first time in his life. By the final battle, he stood beside Odysseus as a man, fighting equally against 100 enemies. Third, Athena. Without her, Odysseus dies in the first chapter. She is the real architect. She disguises him, guides him, fights beside him, and walks through every dangerous moment with him. She wasn't just helping, she was winning a divine power struggle against Poseidon, with Odysseus as her piece. And fourth, yes, Odysseus himself. Not because he was noble, because he refused to die. He lost every ship, every man, every comfort, every certainty, and 20 years of his life. His heroism isn't glory or virtue, it's pure stubborn human will against impossible odds. 4 heroes, 4 kinds of heroism: endurance, growth, justice, and survival, all in one story. Homer made Odysseus the narrator, so for 3,000 years we only saw one of the 4 clearly. Maybe Homer's deepest message was this: heroism was never about one man at all. So now you know. 3,000 years of poets, scholars, and audiences all got Odysseus partly right and partly wrong. The real question isn't who Odysseus was, it's which version of him you choose to believe. If this changed how you see the Odyssey, hit subscribe, because next time we're putting Achilles on trial. Thank you and see you in the next one.